Matthews. He's a mental health practitioner with over 30 years of experience in counseling in rural areas, and his focus for the past 2 decades has been farmer mental health support. He has been the director of mental health services during 5 natural disasters, and Ted provides outreach training and public speaking related to farm stressors nationwide. So welcome, Ted.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Any questions so far? When I do presentations, and especially to farmers, one of the things that I have to focus on all the time is the concept of mental health and not mental illness. And I say that over and over and over because one of the problems people have is they think it's not that bad yet. I can still handle it. I can do one more thing. I can handle one more thing. And if you do that, really you're playing Russian roulette to see how far it is that you can go before it's too far. So you need to understand that mental health is just that. Why wouldn't every person want to be mentally healthier? Why wouldn't every person want to be happier? So we're not talking about Rhodes Scholar stuff here. We're talking about simply taking care of yourself better because it's in your best interest to do so. The concepts that mental health means there's something wrong with you immediately turns you into a wrong direction. Mental health is looking at yourself and wanting to be happier and healthier. Why wouldn't you? So the first thing I want to talk about is self. Taking care of self is incredibly important. And most of us have heard, well, if you're nice to other people, they'll be nice to you. That's stupid. If you're nice to you, you have the ability to be nice to other people. And that's incredibly important. If you take care of yourself, if you're kind to yourself, if you look at all of your issues, your family issues, you will be able to take care of yourself better. Any dairy farmers in here? Okay, you're all crazy, everyone. Now, imagine a non-dairy farmer looking for work, and there's an ad in the paper. It says, wanted, dairy farm. 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and you get a weekend off a year, and that's what we call a vacation. I mean, can you imagine how many people would be lined up to say, hey, where do I sign up for that? Dairy farmers, it's in their blood. There is no way you can explain why you're a dairy farmer. Simply, it is who you are. It is what you are. It is what you believe in, and probably what your father, grandfather, maybe even great-grandfather believed in. So, trying to explain that to people is almost impossible. One of the things I like, when I talk to all dairy people, one of the things I like to say is, just think while you're in here listening to me, all of those grain farmers are out there working. Because dairy is 12 months a year, 7 days a week, and there is no reason for it other than passion. And that's a pretty good reason. But it's one that you have to remember. So, when I look at farms, one of the things that I see, probably the biggest thing I've seen change in the last 50 years is women on the farm. Totally different than it used to be. Totally. What was the role of women 50 years ago? Make little farmers, do everything inside the home, right? Now what's their role? A lot of them do the books. What happens when women do the books? What do they have that they didn't have before? Perspective. An opinion. Now they're looking at it and saying, why do we have to get a John Deere? Why can't we wait till next year? Why can't we get a smaller one? Why can't we get a used one? Now, is that in the form of complaint? Heck no, two heads are better than one, but we haven't had that in the past. So it's incredibly difficult to just do that. You can't simply just jump in and say, I know how to do this. So that creates a lot of problems. And as I like to say to a lot of audiences, this is going to shock you all, men and women don't think alike. So if men and women don't think alike, how do you communicate well? And oftentimes I hear people under their breath say, we don't. Now, because we look at things different because of gender, one of the problems we have is when stress gets really high, and by the way, I get so tired of hearing constantly that the reason farmers are stressed is money. The reasons farmers are stressed is money is one. And then there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Stress is normal on a farm. And lots of different reasons. So, when men and women have to now communicate better, a lot of women work off the farm. That wasn't the case in the past. And so, husbands and wives, as men feel higher stress, what do? What do men do when they feel a high stress? Pull back. And the higher the stress, the more they pull back. The less they want to talk, and the more they think their wife is bugging the hell out of them because they just want to be left alone, they've got to figure this out, and they don't need somebody talking all the time about it. What is she thinking? Why won't he talk to me? Why doesn't he listen? Why won't he sit down with me? Doesn't he love me? Doesn't he care? Does he think this is all about him? What about me? What about the kids? What about his brother? So, why that is so significant is I'm already in a fight with my wife and we haven't started talking yet. Because I'm sitting down thinking, oh God, here we go again. And she's sitting down thinking, we need to talk. So, communication, the first thing you need to do in that scenario is accept the fact that simply because you're different people, you think differently. That's okay. Just think different. So be aware of that and be nice to yourself about that. Now, secondly, with men and women when they argue. Any of you in here have ever argued with your wife or husband? I'm probably talking to the wrong group. Nobody has, huh?
Oh, I have.
I have. All right.
Whole time.
When you argue, what happens? When you get mad enough, who walks out of the room, the man or the woman? What do you think?
I storm out. Man.
It's the man. He walks out of the room when he's mad. And who do you think follows him out saying, I'm not done with you yet? Now, those are normal things. And the more we understand them as being normal, the easier it is. So, with farming, and people talk about stress, anxiety, depression, you hear those terms every day, all the time, constantly. Now, the answer to stress, anxiety, and depression is logic. So, using logic, I'm going to tell you all, be happy from now on. Logical, good idea. is not good enough to say, I know I need to be happy. I know I need to be happier. I know we as a family need to be happier. What's important is that I say, we need to be happier. How are we going to do that? And the key to that is I didn't say, how do we fix it? How do we go from A to Z? How do we make it all good? That never happened. Stress, anxiety, depression. If it was so easy to figure all that out, then anyone in here can explain to me why there are 100,000 books written on stress, anxiety, and depression. Why would there be 100,000 books written on it if it's that easy? So it becomes really important to understand your own. Most of the authors of those books wrote them with themselves in mind. This is the stress I felt. This is what I did to get out of it, which is why there are millions of books catering to that in every other direction. So you have to understand that we are complex. To me, the most complex thing in this universe is human emotion. There is nothing more complex than human emotion. So, if that is so complex, what do we do with it? Why do I feel the way I do? Now, if I can't explain why I feel the way I do, does that mean I don't feel that way? No. Simply means I don't know why I feel the way I do, but if I looked at it 1,000 times and I keep trying to figure out why I feel that way, and every time I come up with, I don't know, guess what? The 1,001st time you're going to come up with the same conclusion. I don't know why I feel that way. So going through that is a waste of time, because what we need to do is say, I do feel this way. Not why, but I do. And if I do feel that way, what am I going to do? What do I need to do? What can I do? What are my options? Now, people love to talk to me, especially the media. They love to talk to me about farm suicide. That's a huge, popular topic, farm suicide. Farmers are one of the top 3 professions that commit suicide. Everybody know that? I'm sure you do, most of you anyway. So, what's the first question people ask? Why? Well, let's talk about emotion. Let's talk about depth of emotion. Not what do I feel, but how deeply do I feel it? If something happened on the farm and it's overwhelming to one farmer, it may not be overwhelming to another farmer, and it may be just one of those things to another farmer that just says, well, stuff happened, moving on. Same exact situation, same money issues, same everything, and how the reaction goes can be completely different, because guess what? We are all different. Every one of us is different. So how we go through that process, what we go through, we look at those things as weakness or strength. If flat affect is no emotion at all, we're dead if we have a flat affect, okay? Now, the healthiest people alive, our emotions are like this. That means we have good days and bad days for absolutely no reason. Some people swing even further than that. Everybody's probably heard of bipolar. That's huge swings. On an emotional level, if any of you know somebody that's bipolar, chances are relatively good that if you know somebody that's bipolar, they have gotten off their medications at one time or another. Why? Why, when you're sinking to such a low depth that you're suicidal, why would you get off of medication? Anybody know?
They think they feel better.
close, because the swings, none of us feel that good for absolutely no reason when they're up here. So when they're on their medication, nope, they don't go down here, but they also never go up here either. And they miss that. And they can't get it. And so at some point, they get off their medication because they want to feel that high, and they forget about how bad that low is. Now for us on emotional levels, hopefully nobody in here is bipolar, and on an emotional level, we have to look at ourselves without judging it as being good, bad, or anything else. Simply me. This is how I am. This is how I process. This is where I go for my emotional highs and lows, and not how does everybody do it? What's the consensus? What percentage of people do A, B, C? Doesn't matter. Now, getting back to this concept of stress, farmers, can you tell me a time, anybody in here, can you tell me a time when you have no stress based on the farm? Ever. Ever. So when people talk about the stress because of the money, that's one thing. So at the end of the year, if you find out you made money, then you don't have any more stress. What do you have to do next? Get your books ready to get an operating loan so you can do it again next year, which is stressful. And then when you plant, what are you doing? What if it's too wet? What if it's too dry? What if it's too cold? So you sit at the edge of the field like we've done in the past and rev your engines and wait for that second to get to the right temperature, and when it gets to within 2 degrees, close enough. So stress about planting. And then what's next? You're gonna get aphids, you're gonna have hail, wind damage. So you process through all of that. Then it's time to bring in the crop. Well, what's the moisture in the corn? If it's too high, what do? Do you wait? Do you wait too long? If you don't have a dryer, a lot of times it costs you more to dry it than it did to make money on it. So you worry about that. So you go through all of that, and then what happens next? Bring in the crop, find out you made money, you say hallelujah, and now you're getting your books ready for the next year. So farmers are always stressed, and that's something that you simply need to accept as a statement of fact. Anybody who tells you differently isn't a farmer. So being nice to yourself about that becomes really important. Farm accidents. What would you say the percentage of farm accidents during harvest is? 50%? 70? 80?
80%?
80%? That's probably pretty close. Now, why do we have accidents during harvest?
Cut corners.
Cutting corners, tired, haven't slept, thinking about one thing when you should be thinking about another, all of those things. And why? Because we want to get it done. And how many farmers do you know that look at, okay, it takes me 29 days to get my crop out. So I'm going to give myself 3 days extra mentally because I know something is going to break down. No. Anything that happens, we act as if, why would that happen to me? And something happened last year, and the year before, and the year before. But each time we react strongly because we haven't had any sleep, we need to get it done, we're tired. And how nice are we to our spouses during harvest? Take a wild guess as to when I do the most marriage counseling. And here's the problem. If I say something to somebody that I love and loves me, and it's a nasty thing, and I say it because I'm too tired, I'm overworked, stressed, and I just blurt it out for all those reasons. And I forget about it 10 minutes after I said it. Do you think the person I said it to forgets it? So what happens? They come back at us 5 years later and say, remember when you said blah, blah, blah? So we set ourselves up. Anger. That's another thing. People always talk about, well, I'm not going to get angry anymore. I'm going to control my temper. That is my New Year's resolution. I am not going to get angry anymore. Good luck. So, why is that impossible? First of all, anger by itself doesn't exist. There's no such thing as anger. It's a reaction to something, and most of the time, it's a soft emotion. We're hurt, we're jealous. And why is that important? Well, if I'm trying to control my anger, but my anger doesn't come from anger because there's no such thing by itself, I'm going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over, which most of us in here have done. Get angry at the same things over and over and swear we're not going to do it anymore. So how can we change that? For one, identify the emotion that we're feeling. Identify what's going on. Why am I angry? What is the emotion that's triggering it? That's pretty important. For two, understand that if I had a place I could write, I'd show you, but imagine a scale of 1 to 10. Now, the very healthiest of us on our best day wakes up at between 2 and 3 on the anger level. We all have things going on in our life. So there's no such thing as waking up in the morning and starting at 0. And guess where our numbers are during harvest? And then when things happen during harvest, guess where that number is? Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the explosion, what happened? Well, I can tell you right now that 10 is not the number you need to look at. 8 is the number that you need to look at. 8. Because at 8, we justify our anger. Now, we may not explode right away, but once we justify our anger, we're going to explode. And everybody in this room has justified their anger, exploded, and then after they did and they calmed down, thought, why was I so mad? Why did I do that? Once we justify our anger, it's over. So we need to understand ourselves, and we need to know how that builds up. And most importantly, what we need to know is what's in it for me to control that. Because if I can bring down my anger, will that make my life better? And if the answer is no, don't bother. But if the answer is yes, then we need to find ways to bring it down for our sake. I will feel better if I do that. So I want to turn it a little bit because I always have less time than I want. Let's talk about fathers and sons on a farm. Now, I'm just guessing that all the males in here were a son at one time. And most of you are fathers by now. Some maybe even grandfathers. And traditionally in this era, farmers send their kids off to college to get an education, oftentimes in farming, agrology, or accounting, something that's going to help the farm. And they do that, and everybody's happy, and the son comes home or the daughter comes home, and what happens next?
The idea is that he brings back a classroom. What's that?
Yep, that's the idea. How many fathers in here say, that's a great idea, son, I think we'll do that? It's like, part of it is, as a farmer that worked for their dad, now it's my turn, damn it. And I don't want to listen to somebody telling me how to run my farm. And when it's your turn, how many of you have said this to your kid? When it's your turn, you can do whatever you damn well please. But it's not your turn. And what happens with that? Well, imagine a son that comes home and says, I don't want to do anything. I'm good, Dad. Whatever you want to do, I'll do. What do we think of him? Not much.
He has no interest in the farm.
Yeah, and so that's bad. And then, if they do have interest and they say, I've got this idea and that idea, well, that's bad too. Because I'm the guy who decides, not the son. So, you should want your children to come back to the farm to have opinion. And you should understand that you were all young. You wanted a lot of those changes. You wanted to be bigger and better and all those things. And older and younger can be a balance. The older is going to be conservative and not want to lose. No kidding. Of course that's how they will look at it. The younger is want to do everything, change everything, get bigger, buy more. That's also normal. So finding a balance, listening to each other, and working towards things is a healthy thing. Next, I want to talk a little bit about chores. Now, a lot has been said about chores. The poor farmer that had to do chores growing up, and now his son or daughter plays 5 sports, and they're in the plays, and they're in choir. Good for them. And I have nothing against sports. Hell, I was in lots of sports. But what happened? Well, how did you as dads get to know your father? By working next to him. Not by sitting at the coffee table, chatting. By working next to him, by doing chores. And how many of you did chores, by the way? Show of hands here. How many of you did chores? Boy, a lot of you had farm accidents, right? Because you only have this much arm, you know? So, how many of you like doing chores? So, how many of you are proud of the fact that you did chores and it made you a better person? There you go. So, even if you didn't like it, you know that it was good for you to do them, even if you didn't like them. So, that being the case, how does sons get to know their dad? By working with them on a farm. So, if we do our kids this great honor of not having to do chores and not doing any of those things, how can we expect them to have a work ethic when they become adults? Who's that on, them or you? Work ethic comes from work. Doesn't come from philosophy. It comes from work. So if you have expectations of your children being good workers, whether it's on the farm or off the farm, then you need to have expectations of them doing chores, and you don't have to have expectations of them saying, thank you very much, I'm glad you made me do that. It's what good work ethic is caused by work. So I would encourage every one of you to have expectations of your children to do work if you want them to succeed. Which for a lot of people is not a very popular opinion, but it's mine. So let's talk a little bit too about communication on the farm when issues come up. Now, most of you, if you're the primary farmer, make the decision on your own. And I would say there's nothing wrong with that, but what's wrong with listening to other opinions and getting more thoughts? You don't have to do it. Communication is not about people talking. If anybody in this room sits down and talks to me and they don't respect me, don't bother talking to me. And the vice versa. If I don't respect you, why would I bother talking to you? Why and how did we get this concept that respect means we have to agree? How did that happen? Respect means I respect you and I can disagree with a lot of things that you say, but I respect you as a person. And if I don't waste your time, don't talk to me, because you truly are wasting your time. How many of you have had conversations with people that you didn't respect, and at the end you said, okay, I respect you now? We respect people, we don't have to agree with them. We have to say what we think and respect their opinion, even if we disagree with them. Or you're wasting your time. So, when I talk about adolescence, how many of you, some of you still are adolescents, but how many of you were adolescents? 1, 2, that was pretty good. So, you remember as adolescents, what was your thought process? What did you do? As an adolescent, did you say, more than anything else, I want to do exactly what my dad and mom want me to do? So, why I find humor in this is all of us as kids, when we were adolescents, we did what we were told because there was a punishment involved, but did we do it because it was the right thing to do? We need to understand that when we talk to our adolescents, they're not supposed to be like us. They're not supposed to think like us. They're adolescent, just like you were. Adults tend to forget that they were adolescents. And as an adolescent, Johnny comes home, says, Dad, Mom, there's a party at Bill's house. Can I go? What does the parent say? Is there going to be alcohol there? Are there going to be girls there? Going to be drugs there? All those questions. Think back. You have told your parents the truth. Oh yes, yeah, a lot of beer, Dad. Yeah, girls, well hell yeah, that's why I'm going. So, we didn't tell tell the truth, and it wasn't because we were liars, it was because we were adolescents. So our expectations of our kids, we need to remember. We were adolescents. We're not being bad, evil. We're simply being adolescents. And when we give them that lecture about, well, when I was that age, I know I, blah, 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 and this happened, and if they're listening, guess what? Why do you think they're listening if you're telling that? If you're telling them all this wisdom from when you were young, why do you think they're listening?
We got a boomerang to throw back at you.
Worse, because they think when you shut up, they can still talk you into it. That's the only reason they're listening. Now, should you not give them that lecture then? Oh, absolutely give it to them. But remember who you're giving it for, you. Because you feel better by doing that. But don't expect them to go, oh, wow, yeah, I never thought of that, Dad. I'm sure most of you remember when you were kids, you went to your mom for certain things, you went to your dad for different things, because you knew your dad would say no to this, and you knew your mom would say yes, and the vice versa. So as we see our kids do that, it's like, duh! Don't look at them as being different. Why would they do that? I told you, stop going to your mother. You did. So understand, that's not their place. They're not supposed to be adults. Guess who is? You are. So if you tell them no, they can't go to the party, don't expect them to say, I see the wisdom. It's a good point, Dad. Never thought of that. If you say no, accept the fact that they're not going to like it, but it's the best answer. It's the safest thing for them to do, but don't expect them to understand. Why would they? Keep looking at my watch because I know I only have a little while longer. I have what, 7,000 or 8,000 pages of stuff. Let's talk a little bit about women on the farm now working off the farm. When I first started working with farmers in 1993, the divorce rate on farms was far lower than in town. Far lower. Now it's absolutely the same. No difference. In 1993, when I would speak to a group of 100 farmers, the chances would be there would be no women in the room. None. Now, sometimes I do farm presentations and only women are in the room. And oftentimes it's 50-50. So all that is changing, and it isn't a decision, it's where it is, it's where it's going. And it's where it will continue to go. Back in the day, why couldn't women be the farmers? Because physically, they weren't able to. Well, what weighs more than 50 pounds on the farm anymore? Hell, for some of the lucky farmers, you don't even have to pick rock. You got a machine for that. And any of you have one and want to lend it to me anytime. So labor is no longer what's going to stop them. And right now, the only thing that stops more women from being the primary farmer is tradition. Simply tradition. And in the future, not that far in front of us, there will be more and more women that are the primary farmers. Because they can. So, what happens in a relationship, in a marriage. If a wife goes into town to work, now there's two ways that that can go. One is they're lucky and they're a nurse or a teacher and they really enjoy their job and that's what they do. The other is they're working to pay down the debt and or to pay the insurance. And that is by far the majority of the women that work off the farm. They do it for the wrong reason. Wrong reason being they don't want to do it. And why is that difficult for them? Why is it difficult? Well, how many of you in here talk about farming 99% of the time? Okay. So, if your wife works off the farm, and she comes home, and she's doing a job that she hates, and she's doing it to pay down the debt, and she's doing it to pay the insurance, how happy is she going to be in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? And if the only conversation that goes on at the house is the farm, how important is she? How important do you show her that she is? So it gets worse and worse and worse. And they need to talk to somebody, and they can't talk to you. And how much do they want to go out there and work on the farm to help do chores and so on when they feel they're getting absolutely no respect? Now the problem is, we're not talking about bad people who do bad things to people. We're talking about people just not understanding what's going on with that. And the goal needs to be to make that better, not to say whose fault is it. That's a huge problem that people have. They spend half their time trying to figure out whose fault something is, and they don't spend any time figuring out what they're going to do about it. It's not my fault, it's your fault. It's your fault, it's not my fault. Back and forth, back and forth. And to what? For what? How does that make anything better? So we need to focus. We need to focus on how we can get things done, what we can do. So I don't have much time left, so I'm going to open it up for questions. That usually makes the room really quiet.
Is women's suicide rate, does that come up equal with men now, or is it still way less, or how's that
Way,
been
way,
the last
way
20
less.
years?
Yeah, way less. I'd say on farm, 1 woman for every 100 men. Yeah. For one, men are a lot better at it because women will take pills, things like that. Men take a shotgun. That's pretty effective. So it's definitely part of it is that. But yeah, number of women suicides really, really, really low on the farm. Men, it's super high. And one of the reasons for that is that communication thing that I was talking. You know, if you keep pulling back and your stress keeps getting higher and you keep pulling back, well, it's getting worse and worse and worse. You're not talking to anybody about it. At some point, people break. So, any other questions?
Does the size of the operation or diversity of it play any factors? Something?
As far as
Whether if it's just row crops, you mentioned dairy farming, if it's a combination of both, or if it's a 5,000 acre farm, if it's a 500 acre person, just.
well, that would partly depend on how much you owe on that 5,000.
Sure.
And when it comes to family farms, there again, you know, there was a time, not that long ago, where 400 acres, mom, dad, a few chickens, a few cows, a few pigs, that was a viable farm. Now it's a hobby farm. There was time when if you said I'm renting land, it would be like, oh really? Who are you renting it from? Now it's like, how many in here don't rent land? So all of those things have changed, and how we change with them. I mean, there were very conservative farmers back in the 80s that when all the bankers said buy, 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 they just wouldn't do it. And then they became brilliant because they didn't do it and they didn't lose their farm. And the ones who listen to the most to the bankers are the ones who are out, and were out within a couple of years. So who was right? Well, hindsight. You know, with farming, everything in farming is educated guess. Everything. And you need to look at both of those, and they're both true. And if you guess wrong, then learn from that. And one of the problems that some people make is they listen to people that are wrong, and when they're wrong, all they learned is you shouldn't listen to that person. So make your decision, make your own mistake, and then you'll know not to do that again next time, instead of simply don't listen to that guy. So I'm gonna leave you with a joke. Farmer and a lawyer flying cross country. They don't know each other, but they're sitting next to each other. And the lawyer thinks, I'm gonna have a little fun with this guy. So he says, I tell you what, I'm gonna make a bet with you. I'll bet you $500 that you can't ask me a question that I can't answer. $500. And if I ask you a question and you can't answer it, it's only $5. And the farmer doesn't really want to do it. He's kind of be left alone. Finally, the lawyer just talks him into it. So the lawyer looks at him and he says, how far is it from the earth to the moon? And the farmer reaches in his wallet, takes out $5, hands it to him. Then, a little smirk on his face, the lawyer says, your turn. The farmer thinks for a while and he says, what goes up a hill with 3 legs and down a hill with 4? The lawyer thinks and thinks and thinks, can't come up with anything. He Googles it, he uses a house phone, calls the Library of Congress, nothing. Drives him crazy. For an hour he's looking. Finally he just gives up, reaches in his wallet, takes out $500 and hands it to the farmer. Farmer closes his eyes, goes to sleep, and they just walk into the airport, and the lawyer wakes up and he says, you know, this has been driving me crazy. I just paid you $500. $500. What goes uphill with 3 legs and goes down with 4? Farmer reaches in his wallet, takes out $5 and hands it to him. Thanks.